Chester, one of the cooler brawlers to be released here in quite some time, having 5 different supers in his kit. But the main question is which of his supers are the best, and which one's the worst, and which ones fall in between, man? I want to start off this video here today with some really useful information before we dive into the ranking. We have a tweet here by Terry posting off the probability of his supers with 100 different attempts. The results being the most often super out of the 100 was Pop Rocks, the slowdown super, and coming shortly behind that is the Candy Popper with 22% of the 100 supers. Also, a very important mechanic that I think you all should know about Chester's super is there seems to be a default super. People realize that there is a kind of bug going on here. If you die with a super, it will change when you spawn into the default Candy Popper. Don't know if it's a bug, people are calling it a bug, but it could be by design as well. But still important to know if you didn't know. So seeing that Chester has now been in the game for a little bit now, I think we have a pretty dang solid hold over which supers are the better ones to get with Chester and which ones might be lacking here. So hopefully you find this info useful. At the very least, I think it's going to give a bit more use to the spicy dice gadget. I find myself a lot of the time having a hard time knowing when I should use it and re-roll. So if you know what super is the best or which one's the worst, you might have a better idea when to use the gadget. But starting things off with the 5th best super, or the worst super out of the bunch, but that's going to be going to Pop Rocks, believe it or not. I think it's pretty dang unanimous at this point inside the community. People think Pop Rocks is pretty dang underwhelming for Chester here. Ironically enough, Pop Rocks being the most popular super that individual found out of the test of 100 different supers, so not very good, man. So I think there's a few big things holding Pop Rocks back as a super, and of course when we are ranking these, I'm not saying Pop Rocks is inherently bad or anything like that, but we are pitting them up against the other supers that Chester has in his arsenal. Of course, Pop Rocks does a good amount of damage, but that damage, in order to apply it, they need to be within that radius the entire duration of it. So while the damage is there, most of the time you're only going to be doing like 4-ish ticks of it before the enemy unit decides to get out of the radius slowly. While on top of that, Chester, you can play a little bit more hyper aggro where you're trying to get off those big shots up close to people and things like that, because he does do the damage with his basic attack, but most of the time in 3v3 game modes or in Showdown even, you're going to be playing at a distance. So because of that, a good portion of the time, it's hard to make use of this super if you are in those situations dealing your damage at a distance, where if that's the major bit of gameplay that's going on the map, most of the time you're really only going to find use from that super by using it for crowd control, choking out different pivotal points on the map, or if someone were to go in on you, utilizing that super to slow them down and deal that damage on them. Very rarely are you able to use this super offensively when you're going in on them. So in my opinion, I think the biggest thing that it's lacking isn't necessarily it's slow, because slows are great. The damage, I guess, is there, but the ability to place it where you like would make this super so much better, kind of like a spike super. Placing it at your feet just makes it very hard to utilize for a brawler like Chester, very niche. Moving along to the 4th best super of the package, and I think taking a pretty dang big leap from Pop Rocks, we have Strong Mint here. You cannot deny the healing capabilities of this super is just insane. I had a really hard time putting Strong Mint here at the 4th place spot, because arguably out of all of the 5 supers, this one is the most useful. Where all of the other supers that Chester has their own use cases, of course, some of which are more useful than others, which is why we're making this video here today. But I find when you roll Strong Mint, there's never a time where you are debating, am I going to be able to make use of this in a good way? When you get the healing, you know you can pocket it. When you need healing, you can use it. Now, the reason it's making the 4th place spot is for a few different reasons here. Number one, 3600 is a ton of HP, but for for a brawler like Chester, it's hard to make use of all that 3600 in a lot of circumstances, where in order to make full use of strong mint, you have to be at 1350 HP or lower, which is really low when maxed out on Chester. Where I find a lot of the time when I want to use strong mint so I can go on to the next super and get a damage dealing one, I'm not even able to get like 50% of the healing capability of it. Another key aspect holding it back is the delay in which the healing comes in. There is an animation where the candy pops up above his head and then he eats it and then he starts healing it up, where a lot of the time when you need HP, it's very reactionary. A bull charges in on you, he's starting to tap you. Activating that super is not going to get you the HP that you need in order to help tank all of that damage. You really have to have some forward thinking in order to utilize strong mint in a very good way because of that lag in the animation, where it can be very detrimental a lot of the time. I've wasted supers with Chester because of the lag in the animation, which is not a good thing. Although I know I've been hyping up how much healing is here with this super, but I find it kind of ironic that Byron's gadget heals 1 tick less than this super, where Byron heals up 2400 HP over a span of 3 seconds, but gets it whenever he needs it, doesn't need to charge up a super, and Chester gets 3600 over 3 seconds. But moving along here to number 3, towards kind of the middle of the pack, we have Candy Popper, his kind of default super, we'll call it, because of that bug or intended mechanic we mentioned at the beginning of the video. The second most popular out of the 100 super tests the individual did over here. Pretty cool. Not gonna lie, this super is incredible. I think really close to the second place spot if you ask me. 2820 damage is nothing to laugh about. That is quite substantial. I do find it kind of ironic that his basic attack can supersede that damage quite a lot, but environmental clearing mechanics in the game are really useful. Also on top of that, it's a lobbing mechanic, which is a really good mechanic in Brawl Stars. Can be hard to land your shots because of it sometimes, but giving you the freedom of shooting over walls is very beneficial. I think the only thing holding it back and some of my gripes over it is the radius is so dang small and the range isn't very long, so it's kind of hard to land it in a lot of circumstances, where I find a lot of the time I utilize this super just to destroy walls, not necessarily get the damage from it. I don't mind the range and the radius, but because it's such a slow lag time, kind of like a dynamite super, right? It's super hard to get that damage and get people within your range so you can deal it. But that's definitely a small gripe. It just takes time to get used to that range and radius in order to make the full use of it. But rounding the corner to the top 2, we have the second best super in my opinion, and that's going to be going to Salmiaki. Dude, this super is so dang good, and it's one of my personal favorites. It's incredibly similar to Ems's basic attack, however, the damage that is being applied lasts for 7 seconds. Also, the flat damage coming from this super, though it is over time, is the highest dealing amongst the 5, dealing a whopping 3010 damage, the only super here breaking that 3k mark. Now, some may argue that damage dealing mechanics in this game that function like a poison that deal its damage over time can be a little bit of a setback, seeing that a lot of the time in Brawl Stars you want to dish off your damage quickly. Like, dude, a lot can happen in a span of 7 seconds in Brawl Stars, that's all I'm saying. However, where this can be a weakness, it can also be a positive and a strength. Because it lasts so long, this damage chips down the enemy brawler. It is such a good way to negate them from healing back up. Like, dude, this is such a scary super up against those tankier units like a Frank. You get hit with this, you are incapable of healing back up to max, your health pool being one of the most important things to your character, for like 9 to 10 seconds while the damage is rolling through and then waiting for the health to start regenning. Just a lot of great things to say about this super. Truly the only thing I think that's holding it back is its range, which can be worked around, right? It's got a bit of a shorter range for a super. But then rounding the corner to the by far best super in Chester's toolkit, and that is Jawbreaker. Jawbreaker is the lowest damage dealing super in Chester's toolkit, but it is so dang useful. To the point where, like I said towards the beginning of this video, I hope this list can help you utilize his gadget a little bit more effectively. If you ever roll Jawbreaker, Don't use the gadget on it, man. So of course, the defining characteristic that makes this super so dang good is its 2-second stun at a range. It's a very long stun. When you take away a brawler's mobility for 2 seconds, it's pretty dang detrimental for them. Most of the time, it's going to result in them dying. Not only that, it's got pretty dang decent range in order to land that stun, which can be super beneficial in 3v3 settings. Stun the enemy and then your team can help out wipe them out. With all of these great things that this super has from a just what's good in Brawl Stars standpoint, I think it interacts the best out of all the supers with just Chester's base mechanics. Seeing that Chester does deal a lot of damage with his basic attack and there is an element to a setup with his basic attack, there's a lot of use cases in that where if they're standing still, you can get up close, deal off your crazy damage. If you're running low on ammo, you don't have a way to deal with someone, you can use this as an escape. It's just pretty much useful all the time with Chester's mechanics, whereas a good example of one that isn't sometimes is the one that's coming in last, where it kind of clashes with the way that Chester plays a lot of the time. Or even Strong Mint here, where Chester as a character doesn't have an incredibly large health pool to a lot of the time make use of the full 3600, where this just feels right. Jawbreaker, when you land it, you can do so many things with Chester. But that is the final super in the list here for today. Of course, Chester is a little bit on the newer side of things when it comes to Brawl Stars, but I feel pretty dang confident in these supers. I always love to hear what you guys have to say about videos like this. It's super fun to discuss different opinions and things along those lines. At the very least, it's cool that we can make tier lists and rankings from a super ability of a character. I never thought this day would come. It's super interesting and one of the coolest brawlers to come out in such a long time. But yeah, everyone, hope you all found this video useful or fun or interesting. If you did, make sure to slap a like on it. I'd really appreciate that. Have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Keep having fun with Brawl Stars, and we'll see you all in the next one. Adios and take care.